Hello, Rick here with a Cultural Index Addendum, a sort of light version of the regular index to cover a few extra details about a race that already has a video, in this case the Xindi. While there's a great deal of information on several of the Xindi, others have next to nothing on details such as the subjects of this video, the insectoids, the aquatics and the now extinct avians. Of these three, the insectoid have the most development on screen, so let's start with them. Your typical insectoid is genderless and lives for around about a decade, and with such a short lifespan these bugs are frequently seen as jumpy, jittery and performing everything with a great deal of urgency. While they may appear like this to an outsider, to them this is normal. Their whole lives are sort of sped up, and with compound eyes processing visual data at many times the speed of a mammalian brain, it's no surprise their movements seem quick. A cool fact that I stumbled across while researching compound eyes is that some variations can detect the direction light is travelling, not just the intensity. They reproduce asexually, and due to their short lifespans and the time-consuming nature of space travel, every insectoid ship has a hatchery where the infant young are placed in egg sacs. These eggs hang from the ceiling, presumably an evolutionary trait to keep them out of reach of predators, and they can deploy a neurotoxin in defence, which when sprayed onto an interloper's skin can cause the individual to become protective of the eggs. This makes it dangerous for anyone except a Xindi insectoid to enter their hatchery. That and the fact that you might accidentally step on one. At only hours old, an infant insectoid is already mobile and capable of climbing, running, scurrying, and in a far more advantageous state than a human child would be. Biologically, the insectoid Xindi do not breathe through their mouths. They have small ducts down the side of their thorax through which air is pushed. This is why all their clothing leaves their sides exposed. The fact that they possess an exoskeleton carapace means that they're actually quite hardy on the outside, and suggests that any clothing worn by them is either supplementary to defensive purposes, like armour, or out of a sense of modesty, or to denote status. The last is most likely, as we see the insectoid counsellors wearing brown robes. The drab colour scheme and simplicity of the clothing can be attributed to how their compound eyes view colour, being far better at discerning corners and shapes than hues. They never wore headgear, not even in combat, as this would severely limit their eyesight and potentially cover their antennae, deny them access to their abilities to sense temperature and air movement. And as no air passes through their mouths, they clack and clatter their mandibles to create sounds. These noises translate into a pattern of speech that can be learned, but not replicated by most species. Most Xindi learn a common language as well as aquatic and insectoid to aid in relations among the people. The insectoid Xindi are often quick to make up their minds on things, as their short lives would suggest, and this often puts them at odds with the other council members who would rather debate and then act on consensus. They even come into frequent conflict with the reptilians, unless they're in agreement. It's not that they are stubborn like the reptilians, in fact you can convince an insectoid to change its mind, just good luck catching them before they've already acted on their decision. Such a rapid worldview comes into complete contrast with our second Xindi species, the aquatics. These Xindi are slow to decide, often taking days to contemplate a course of action from every angle. Unsurprisingly, this frustrates the insectoid and reptilian species, and even the primates find their patience is tried. However, the arboreals respect this level of thoughtfulness. As a member of the council, Kaifet Amansor was a typical representative of her race, albeit one from a wealthy family legacy, the Ibex dynasty. Their entire social structure revolved around the appointment of representatives and decision-making based on consensus, but the fact that their councillor was a powerful businesswoman from a proud family line shows that the influence in their culture is wielded by the powerful. When talking with the aquatics, it is necessary to remember that they possess an innate distrust of the spoken word. Now, sound travels further through water than in air, and as such, raised voices are often perceived as threatening, but equally hushed tones are untrusted. This mistrust likely stems from the fact that their own form of communication is so vastly different from ours, as they communicate through sonar-like whale song. They therefore have a difficult time understanding land-based languages, and don't even have the benefit of sharing a room with the other races that even the insectoids enjoy. Even their eyes are adapted for underwater sight. At least the insectoid can detect heat, air pressure and clearly read body language when communicating with others. A pane of glass will forever separate the aquatics from all of that, meaning that the tones of voice are all they have to gauge emotion on, and that can be faked. The best way to address an aquatic is to be respectful and speak with confidence, clearly outlining your words and intentions. Physically, they possess some of the same facial features as most Xindi, the forehead, ridges, and the cheekbones. But they also have a strong, powerful tail and arms to allow for industry and construction, which they excel at, being the species that then constructed the Xindi orb that was to destroy the Earth, and the Federation before it was founded. Perhaps the slow, methodical pace of the aquatics partners well with the construction projects, as their ships dwarf other Xindi vessels. Their spaceships are the biggest and the most powerful of the fleets, and filled to the brim with water. Females of the species were bigger in size too, and they had a preference for darker rooms, as too much light was uncomfortable for them, again because they spent their entire existence underwater. And lastly, there's the avian species of the Xindi. Not much data exists on them at all, as they are extinct by the time of Enterprise, having perished when the insectoid and reptilian forces destroyed Xindus, leading to the Great Diaspora. In fact, we only have 2 images of them, and one is a skull, the other is a drawing, not a photograph or a rendering. What is known is that they were a spacefaring race at least 4,000 years before the humans, establishing several colony worlds in what would eventually become the area of space known as the Expanse, but despite this diversity in location, somehow they all died out. So, like an aquatic, let's overanalyze them. So, the skull that we see on the desk is that of a Xindi avian and was modelled on that of a giraffe. The skull we see is approximately 28 inches long, 12 inches wide and 17 inches tall, therefore around 71 centimetres long. Now, as it's a creature that spends most of its time in flight, its bones must be pneumatised, or full of air pockets to reduce weight. However, it's more than just the weight of a bird that affects its wingspan and size. There are other factors, such as speed and the method of flight. From the image we see that the avians possessed fur and leathery wings, closer to bats than birds, so let's look to them for the next comparison, alongside pterasaurs. They also had teeth rather than beaks, again suggesting more of a mammalian or reptilian alignment, and horn-like structures atop their head. From this image, provided the scaling is correct, then the standard avian was a whopping 2.5 metres tall. Nowhere near as tall as some of the winged dinosaurs from Earth's history, but dwarfing a human and the other Xindi. What about its wingspan? Well, that looks to be around 3.6 metres per wing times 2 plus shoulder width puts the wingspan at around 7.6 metres. From paleontologists measuring the skulls of pterasaurs, they determined that a 75cm skull is supported by a 7 metre wingspan on average, which in turn would be around 155 kilograms of full flying lizard. This is supported more or less by the wingspan to weight ratios that I collected from researching this topic. Seriously, I had to draw up a graph and everything. The one thing we do see of the avian legacy is their architecture on the council planet. This eyrie is a network of caverns and sculpted stone, carved into the solid edifices of towering peaks only accessible by flight. These structures raise some interesting questions, however. The image we see of the avian species has no arms nor talons on their wings. This could be an oversight of the artist, as how did they operate spaceships with no digits, let alone wield tools from masonry? They could have had apparatus that assists them in this endeavour, and of course their alliance with the other races may have swapped out labour for some other commodity, but the other races of the Xindi seem to have lost all records about the existence of the Council Chamber planet, still searching the structures and researching them to this day. Although I guess records can simply be lost to time, I'd like to present another possibility, albeit one based on very flimsy evidence. Now, it said young land-born Xindi children were often told tales of how if they misbehaved, then an avian would swoop down and carry them away, never to be seen again. But what if these tales were based in reality? We know that in the time before the Council, the Xindi did not see eye to eye, so it's not hard to imagine that the avians would abduct members of the other races to work as a slave force, building their ships and carving intricate stonework to house them in hidden fortresses beyond the reach and eyes of the other Xindi. Speculation, as I said, but the race is surrounded by mystery. How is it that they were all wiped out with the destruction of Xindus when they had such widespread colonies? Well, one rumour surfaced not long after the Council came about, but was never spoken of out loud for fear of disrespecting the Guardians. But it seems that the avians did not trust them, and were not willing to accept their help during the Great Diaspora. This suggests that they did indeed make it off-world with the other races, but were selectively lost as the Guardians abandoned them in deep space. Or perhaps worse. Perhaps due to their history as slavers, the avians recognised the Guardians for the exploitative species they truly were, and their penance was extinction, lost to the void. Thanks for watching this addendum, and like I said, with these races there's not a lot to go on, so I figured a 3-for-1 video would be the best way to approach them. With that all said, there's only one Xindi race left to explore, which we will get to in time, but until next index, I will see you later. Thanks again for watching. I've been Rick, and goodbye.